Welcome back. First off, I want to just say, wasn't it great to see the video last week of the pumpkin carver? Talk about artistry in action. I heard so many people tell me how much they enjoyed that. So if you missed that blog, it's worth checking back to see a master create from a pumpkin an incredible face. Well, November is what we're calling Brain Month, and so we're going to be exploring the brain, feeding the brain, how we use our brain, and so on. I'm going to start this off, the series, with a little bit of an overview of the way we've changed our thinking about the brain. And then next week I have a great guest coming. Preet Marwaha is going to come. He's a very talented, brilliant man who's going to tell us why we need to really pay attention to how we feed and care for the brain. After that, we're going to dive into some looking at practices and things that we can each do to nurture our brain and build it in the way that's going to serve us. Because one of the key concepts that's changed in the last number of years, it seems pretty recent to me, but I'm sure scientists have been working on it a long time, is the whole idea that the brain is growing and evolving. It is not static. We know that a baby grows and so on, but at a certain point, I think many people, myself included, have thought that the brain just was what it was. It was all developed. Well, in fact, we know that the brain is going to grow and develop and evolve based on how we use it all the way through to the end of our life. So that's pretty interesting and a very big change. Second, we know that how we think influences the brain. And this is not just a kind of nice concept, that literally the thoughts we have and the patterns that we kind of follow fire and wire off neural pathways that literally create the brain. The most dramatic example of this is, I think, the research that's been done with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And they've studied the brain scan of people that have OCD. And it is a very distinctive profile that any neurologist can spot. So very interesting to look at, here's a normal brain, here's a person with OCD, and what's the difference in their brain? Well, research was done to look at, is this kind of the way the person has always been? The brain's always been a little different. Lots of questions in how this all works for the person with OCD. So they devised a research project to really study, could you take a normal brain and by doing the patterns that a person with OCD does, would it change the actual brain structure? The answer is yes. But even more surprising, in a mere 4 weeks, the brain of a normal person went from that to a brain showing full-blown OCD. The flip side of that that's exciting is if we can create that, we can also uncreate it in the sense of reverse those patterns. And so that opens the door to some of the things that really are very exciting. That we can actually, for example, if I do not have the ability to hear, what if we get the information into my brain from a different source? In other words, what if I don't use my ears to hear, but I use some other part of the body? Likewise, there's been some great examples of people that don't see. And now recognize that the eyes are actually like the camera. That's just where the data goes in. Seeing, what you and I think of as seeing, is really a process that happens in the brain. So what if we get the information from the world into the brain in another way rather than through the eyes? So all of these things are opening up incredible possibilities, tons of hope. As I've talked about in the past, we now know also that if the brain is damaged, say to a stroke, or a person is born with part of the brain not there, that the brain actually can rewire. It can compensate. We can actually train it so that what's missing, the brain works around. And it's almost as if the deficit is not there. So these are major changes that have occurred in the last, I'd say, 50 years or less in our understanding of the brain. The last piece I wanted to talk about today is the teenage brain, because so many people as parents are really looking at, how do I help my teenager? How do I support him or her to be safe, to stay open to learning, to just not get lost in the teenage years where they disconnect from people and from life and seem to be on a self-destruct pattern. Well, Dr. Daniel Siegel has put out a new book, Brainstorm: The Power and Purpose of the Teenage Brain. What a great title, The Power and Purpose of the Teenage Brain. And he identifies the changes that are going on that are partly an integration process where the brain is almost upgrading itself to function in a higher way. But also it changes how the teenager is going to be operating. And there's 4 major changes that he talks about, one of which, of course, we know, the impulse control. That there's a great desire for novelty, for newness. And so anyway, he outlines 4 major changes that happen in the teenage brain that I think you'll want to read about if you're dealing with teenagers or you know you're going to have teenagers, because his whole premise is we can work with the teenager and support these shifts so that they really are empowering for that teenager. All right, so lots to look forward to. The month of November is going to be a great month to stay tuned to the blogs and to learn more about this amazing, amazing brain that we all have and how to optimize that. All right, I also want to give a shout out to Julie Prescott, who lives in the house that I live in. She is an artist, a writer, a photographer, a jeweler, a very creative person, and she has once a year an annual jewelry sale. So as you may notice, I'm wearing a piece of hers today just to feature that. And today, starting today in fact, she opens the house and her studio to people to come and see and enjoy what she's been creating all year. There'll be wonderful sales because she likes to let things go and keep fresh and new in what she's creating. And it's an opportunity to get some beautiful one-of-a-kind pieces. Julie collects gems and like seawater pearls. She works with silver and leather and all kinds of materials. So she really is an artist, and it's fabulous to come and look at what she's created, pick some things up for people that you know could use a little more beauty in their life. So we'll list the information below and the dates. It starts today. It runs for 3 days, her sale is, and it really is a wonderful event. Come to our home, have a little nibble, and we'll greet you very warmly. All right, thanks for today, and we'll look forward to talking next week with Preet and hearing how we should all be feeding our brain. So this week, if you were to consider paying attention to what you're thinking, my offering is, why don't you start just really checking and asking yourself the question, is what I'm thinking really serving me? Knowing that every thought fires and wires a neural pathway. Are you grooving pathways that really serve you, that you like, that help you feel the way you want to feel or show up the way you want to show up? So, homework if you want it for this week, just track a little bit your thoughts and ask that question, is what I'm thinking really serving me? All right, bye-bye.